3 bogeys on my radar. That's how it started. What was supposed to be a routine patrol over international waters. I'm Lieutenant Colonel James Barrett, 47, with over 4,000 flight hours in the F-15 E-Strike Eagle. The year was 2005, and I was leading a 2-aircraft formation near disputed airspace. My wingman, Captain Rodriguez, was flying 3 miles off my starboard wing when command ordered us to investigate an unidentified aircraft approaching a naval vessel. The weather was deteriorating rapidly, visibility dropping to less than a mile with heavy cloud cover that would make visual identification nearly impossible. I remember checking my fuel levels, calculating we had about 40 minutes before we need to head back to base. Command, this is Eagle 1. We're adjusting course to intercept and identify. I reported, banking my aircraft 30 degrees to the west. The tension was already building in my chest. Something felt off about this mission from the start. In my 15 years of service, I developed an instinct for when situations were about to escalate beyond their initial parameters. The radio crackled with static as command acknowledged, but there was an unusual delay in their response. Through my visor, I could see the dark storm clouds gathering ahead, threatening to engulf us entirely. Rodriguez confirmed the course adjustment and tightened formation as we approached the coordinates provided. My radar systems were struggling with the atmospheric interference, showing intermittent contacts that would appear and disappear unpredictably. As we descended through 30,000 feet, my radar suddenly lit up. Not 3, but 6 unidentified aircraft had appeared, moving at supersonic speeds directly toward our position. Rodriguez, are you seeing this? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Affirmative, sir. I count 6 bogeys. Moving fast, came his tense reply. Command was immediately notified, but their response was concerning. Eagle 1, be advised, you are now operating in sensitive airspace. Proceed with caution. Rules of engagement have been updated to your systems. I quickly checked my combat computer. We were now authorized to engage if threatened. My heart rate spiked as I realized the routine patrol had just transformed into something much more dangerous. The approaching aircraft weren't responding to identification requests, maintaining radio silence while continuing their intercept course. The situation deteriorated within seconds. One of the unidentified aircraft launched a missile, the warning system in my cockpit screaming as my threat detector registered the heat signature. Missile launch. Evade! I shouted to Rodriguez as I slammed the throttle forward and pulled into a sharp climbing turn, deploying countermeasures. The brilliant flare of chaff and flares erupted behind my aircraft as I executed the defensive maneuver. Rodriguez acknowledged and broke formation in the opposite direction, exactly as we trained countless times. As I pulled 7GS in the climb, blood rushing from my head, I could see the missile tracking through my chaff, adjusting course. This wasn't a warning shot. This was an attempt to take us down. In that moment, everything changed. What started as an identification mission had just become a fight for survival in international airspace, with no immediate backup available and communications with command becoming increasingly sporadic and delayed. The missile streaked past my wing by less than 50 feet, the proximity making my entire aircraft shudder. I leveled out at 35,000 feet, scanning frantically for Rodriguez. There he was, executing a textbook defensive maneuver, but 2 enemy aircraft were already moving to bracket him. Rodriguez, break right now. I shouted into my comms. The crackling response came back immediately, comms failing, their jam dash before cutting to static. In that moment, I had to make a decision that would change everything. We were outnumbered 3-1, communications were compromised, and we had limited fuel. Military protocol dictated we should disengage and retreat, preserving our aircraft and lives. But Rodriguez was being targeted, and our naval vessel below remained vulnerable. I took a deep breath, tightened my grip on the controls, and made my choice. This is Eagle 1, engaging hostile aircraft. I transmitted, knowing command might not even receive it. I banked hard toward the nearest enemy fighter, switching my weapons system to active. The enemy pilot clearly didn't expect this. His aircraft maintained course for a crucial half-second before attempting evasive action. That delay was all I needed. I acquired radar lock and launched an AIM-120 AMRAAM missile. The satisfying tone of target acquisition filled my headset as I immediately broke away, not waiting to confirm a hit. Veteran pilots know you never linger after a launch. The enemy fighter erupted into a ball of flames seconds later, confirming what my training had taught me. Sometimes the best defense is a decisive offense. My heart pounded as adrenaline coursed through my veins, the world narrowing to just me, my aircraft, and the threats around us. The remaining 5 hostiles immediately changed formation, 2 continuing to pursue Rodriguez, while 3 now turned their attention to me. My threat warning system blared as multiple targeting radars locked onto my aircraft. This was the moment where training takes over completely, where thousands of hours in simulators and practice engagements become the difference between life and death. I dove toward the cloud layer below, accelerating to supersonic speed while deploying a continuous stream of countermeasures. The cloud cover would briefly shield me from visual tracking, giving me precious seconds to execute my next move. As I entered the dense gray mass, visibility dropped to 0, and I relied entirely on instruments. My plan was risky but necessary. Dive through the cloud layer, cut engines briefly to reduce heat signature, then execute a hard reverse climb back toward the pursuers. Bursting through the clouds at 20,000 feet, I immediately cut power, letting momentum carry me, while simultaneously initiating a hard rudder turn that flipped my aircraft nearly 180 degrees. Re-engaging engines at full afterburner, I rocketed back upward, now behind my pursuers who were still diving after my previous trajectory. This maneuver, practiced countless times but rarely executed in combat, placed me in perfect firing position. 2 enemy aircraft filled my targeting screen, completely unaware I was now behind them. I hesitated for just a split second. This engagement wasn't officially sanctioned, and I knew there would be consequences. But when I heard Rodriguez's voice break through the static, "Eagle 1, I'm hit. Systems failing." All hesitation vanished. I locked onto both targets simultaneously and fired my remaining AMRAAMs, watching as the missiles streaked toward their targets through the scattered clouds. The double explosion illuminated the clouds around me as both missiles found their targets. 3 down, 3 to go. But I was now out of long-range ordnance, with only heat-seeking sidewinders and my 20mm cannon remaining. Rodriguez had managed to eject safely. I spotted his parachute descending toward the ocean below, where our naval vessel was already dispatching a rescue helicopter. That left me alone against the 3 remaining enemy fighters, who had regrouped and were now hunting me with renewed determination. I checked my fuel gauge. The engagement had burned through my reserves faster than anticipated. I had maybe 15 minutes of flight time left, less if I continued using afterburner. Command was still silent, likely due to the enemy's continued electronic warfare jamming our communications channels. The 3 remaining fighters split into a classic pincer formation, attempting to trap me between them. It's a tactic I'd seen before during my deployment near the Persian Gulf. Highly coordinated and dangerously effective. I needed to break their formation before they could execute their plan. Pushing my aircraft to its structural limits, I climbed vertically at maximum thrust, watching my airspeed indicator carefully. At precisely the right moment, I cut thrust and used the aircraft's momentum to continue upward while simultaneously rolling 180 degrees. As gravity reclaimed my aircraft, I was now inverted and diving directly toward the lead enemy fighter, giving him no time to adjust his course. His radar would have trouble locking onto my rapidly approaching aircraft at such a steep angle. The enemy pilot tried to break away, but too late. I squeezed a trigger, my cannon erupting with a staccato rhythm I felt through my entire airframe. Tracer rounds streaked through the sky, connecting with his right wing. I pulled up hard, missing his aircraft by mere feet as it began to spiral downward, trailing smoke and flames. No time to celebrate. The remaining 2 enemies had adjusted to my position and were now approaching from opposite directions, attempting to catch me in a crossfire. My warning system screamed as multiple missile locks detected. This was the most dangerous scenario in air combat, trapped between two enemies with nowhere to run. But experienced pilots know that when conventional options fail, the unexpected becomes your greatest weapon. Instead of trying to evade both opponents, I did the one thing they wouldn't anticipate. I flew directly toward one of them. It's counterintuitive to fly toward a threat, which is precisely why it sometimes works. The enemy pilot hesitated, not expecting a head-on approach, and fired his missile too late. I deployed my last chaff countermeasures and executed a barrel roll, letting the missile pass harmlessly below me while continuing on collision course. It became a game of chicken at supersonic speeds. Who would break first? I held my course until the last possible second before executing a high G turn that pushed me to the edge of consciousness, blood draining from my head as the pressure mounted. The maneuver brought me directly behind the enemy aircraft, now perfectly positioned for a Sidewinder shot. The missile left my wing with a lurch, tracking unerringly toward its heat source. The Sidewinder struck true, transforming the enemy aircraft into an expanding ball of debris. But the victory was short-lived. My extreme maneuver had cost me precious energy and left me vulnerable to the final remaining fighter. My aircraft shuddered violently as cannon fire from behind struck my left wing, tearing through metal and systems alike. Warning lights illuminated across my instrument panel as hydraulic pressure dropped and my flight controls became sluggish. The damage was severe but not catastrophic. I could still fly, but my aircraft's performance was severely compromised. With communications still jammed and fuel critically low, I faced the hardest decision yet: disengage and attempt to limp back to friendly airspace, or turn and fight with a damaged aircraft against a fully functional enemy. Some decisions in combat aren't made with calculated logic. They come from somewhere deeper. I thought of my squadron mates who trusted me as their leader, of Rodriguez drifting in his parachute below, of the naval crew counting on air protection. Without consciously deciding, I found myself banking hard, ignoring the strain on my damaged wing, and turning to face my pursuer. The enemy pilot clearly wasn't expecting this, a damaged aircraft turning to attack rather than flee. I used his momentary hesitation to gain a firing position, but my targeting systems were damaged, forcing me to rely on visual tracking and instinct. The distance closed rapidly between us as I prepared for a cannon shot, knowing I would only get one pass before my aircraft's damage and fuel situation would become insurmountable. Through my canopy, I could now clearly see the enemy fighter, a model I recognized but that shouldn't have been operating in this region according to intelligence briefings. Something bigger was happening here, something beyond a simple territorial incursion. My cannon barked to life again, the recoil shaking my already damaged airframe. The first burst missed, passing harmlessly below the enemy aircraft. I adjusted my aim and fired again, watching tracers connect with his fuselage. He broke hard left, attempting to escape my firing arc, but I stayed with him, pushing my wounded aircraft beyond what should have been possible. The structural integrity warnings blared in my cockpit as I maintained pursuit, firing controlled bursts whenever he appeared in my sights. Finally, a lucky shot connected with his engine exhaust, causing a secondary explosion that tore through his aircraft. With all threats eliminated, the adrenaline that had sustained me began to fade, bringing stark reality into focus. I was alone, in a severely damaged aircraft, with critical fuel levels, no communication with command, and potentially in violation of my authorization parameters. The nearest friendly airbase was over 200 miles away, a distance my fuel reserves couldn't possibly cover. Below me, the naval vessel was still recovering Rodriguez, but landing a damaged fighter jet on a ship is challenging under ideal conditions, let alone with compromised flight controls. I had minutes to make a decision that would determine not just my survival, but potentially the diplomatic fallout from this unauthorized engagement. As I began a gradual descent toward the naval vessel, my radio suddenly crackled to life. "Eagle 1, This is Admiral Harrison aboard the USS Nimitz. We've been monitoring. You're cleared for emergency landing. But be advised, Washington is demanding answers. I took a deep breath, knowing the battle might be over, but my ordeal was just beginning. The landing nearly killed me. With hydraulics failing and only partial control of my aircraft, touching down on the carrier deck was like trying to place a wounded eagle gently onto a postage stamp in the middle of the ocean. The arresting wire caught my aircraft harder than normal, slamming me against my harness with bone-jarring force. As the flight deck crew rushed toward my smoking jet with fire extinguishers at the ready, I sat motionless for a moment, hands still gripping the controls, my body processing the fact that I had actually survived. When they helped me from the cockpit, my legs buckled, partly from physical exhaustion, partly from the weight of what had just transpired. Rodriguez was already in the medical bay, being treated for minor injuries sustained during his ejection. I wanted to see him to confirm he was truly okay, but instead I was immediately escorted to a secure briefing room where Admiral Harrison was waiting. 6 enemy aircraft destroyed, 1 pilot rescued, no American casualties. Impressive work, Lieutenant Colonel, Harrison said as I entered, his tone impossible to read. Now explain to me why you engaged without explicit authorization. The debriefing lasted 4 hours. Every decision, every shot fired, every maneuver executed, all scrutinized in excruciating detail. I explained how communications had been jammed, how Rodriguez had been targeted, how the naval vessel itself was potentially at risk. The rules of engagement were updated to our systems before contact, I reminded him, referencing the unusual mid-mission update. The Admiral's expression darkened. That's the problem, Barrett. No such update was authorized by this command. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Someone had transmitted falsified ROE updates to my aircraft, deliberately placing me in that situation. But who and why? The formal investigation began the next day, with officers from Naval Intelligence and the Pentagon arriving by helicopter. I was placed on restricted duty status, confined to quarters when not being questioned. The aircraft I'd shot down were identified as belonging to a hostile non-state actor, operating advanced fighters obtained through black market channels. Their presence in the region was unexpected and concerning to intelligence officials, but their intent remained unclear. Rodriguez's testimony matched mine exactly. The unidentified aircraft had initiated hostilities without provocation. The flight data recordings from both our aircraft confirmed our accounts, including the mysterious ROE update that had seemingly come from command, but that no one in the chain of command had authorized. Technical specialists analyzed the digital signature of the transmission, tracing it to a source that shocked everyone involved. The signal had originated from within our own secure network. Weeks passed with little progress in the investigation. I was permitted limited contact with my family, enough to assure them I was alive and unharmed, but not enough to explain the situation. The psychological toll began to mount. Had I been set up? Was I being used as a scapegoat for some covert operation gone wrong? Or had I unwittingly stumbled into something larger? A test, perhaps, of enemy capabilities or our own response protocols. The uncertainty was worse than any official punishment. Then, exactly 1 month after the incident, I was summoned to a meeting with individuals who identified themselves only as representatives from specialized intelligence services. They showed me satellite imagery from the day of the engagement, images that revealed a much larger formation of enemy aircraft approaching from the north, held in reserve but ready to engage. The 6 you encountered were just the advance force, one of them explained. If you hadn't engaged when you did, the carrier group would have been overwhelmed within the hour. The revelation stunned me into silence. My unauthorized engagement hadn't been a diplomatic incident to be buried. It had prevented a major attack. Why wasn't the carrier group warned? I finally asked. The intelligence officer's response was measured, careful, because the warning would have been intercepted. We had a significant intelligence breach. Someone with high-level access was compromised. The ROE update, it turned out, hadn't been falsified after all. It had been sent through unofficial channels by loyal intelligence officers who had discovered the breach but couldn't risk exposing their knowledge through normal communications. They had gambled on the combat instincts of the pilots on patrol that day, on my willingness to engage when the situation demanded it, regardless of the potential personal consequences. It was simultaneously vindicating and terrifying to realize how close we had come to disaster. The full operation was classified at the highest levels, with only a handful of individuals knowing the complete story. To the public and most military personnel, the incident was recorded as a training exercise with unexpected complications. Rodriguez and I received official reprimands in our service records for procedural violations, a necessary cover to maintain the illusion for whoever had been behind the planned attack. But in a private ceremony attended only by Admiral Harrison and 2 unnamed officials, we were also awarded classified commendations that would remain sealed for 30 years. "You made an impossible choice with limited information," Harrison told me afterward. "That's the burden of command few understand, and even fewer could bear." His words provided some comfort, but I still struggled with the knowledge that I'd never be able to tell the true story. My return to active duty came with a promotion and transfer to a specialized tactical development unit, a position that removed me from frontline operations but utilized my combat experience to train the next generation of fighter pilots. The official story maintained that I had shown poor judgment but valuable tactical innovation during a training exercise gone wrong. Only a handful of people knew that the engagement had been real, the threat eliminated, and that somewhere the individuals who had orchestrated the attempted attack remained at large. Rodriguez was transferred to a different carrier group, our paths rarely crossing afterward. When we did occasionally meet at military functions, a simple nod conveyed our shared understanding. Some burdens are carried alone, some stories remain untold, but the actions themselves remain no less significant for their secrecy. Years passed, and I eventually retired from active service, the incident fading into the background of a long military career filled with other missions, other challenges. I believe the truth would remain buried forever, known only to those directly involved. Then last month, a plain manila envelope arrived at my home with no return address. Inside was a single document, a partially redacted intelligence assessment dated 1 day before my fateful patrol. It outlined a thwarted attack on a naval carrier group, crediting the action to alert patrol aircraft operating under non-standard authorization protocols. A handwritten note accompanied it. Declassification process has begun. The truth deserves to be known. Your decision saved 4,723 lives that day. I don't know who sent it or how the classification process is proceeding. But after all these years of silence, I finally feel ready to tell my story. About that day when I faced 6 enemy fighters alone, made an impossible choice, and discovered later that sometimes the greatest acts of service are the ones that history never records. What would you do if faced with an impossible choice? When protocols say one thing, but your instinct and training tell you another. The story of this brave pilot reminds us that sometimes the most crucial decisions in life come without warning, without complete information, and with enormous potential consequences. These moments define not just military careers, but the character of individuals who serve to protect others. They happen in combat zones, but they also happen in our everyday lives. Moments where we must choose between what's safe and what's right. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where following the rules seemed wrong, but breaking them carried serious risks? This is the reality that military personnel face regularly, making split-second decisions that balance mission objectives, team safety, and strategic implications. The courage to act decisively when everything is on the line. That's what separates true leaders from those who simply hold positions of authority. It's a quality that serves us well not just in combat, but in business, in relationships, and in life's critical moments. The declassified stories we share on this channel reveal the human side of military operations. The fear, the doubt, the determination, and ultimately the triumph of training and character over adversity. Each mission has lessons that extend far beyond the cockpit or battlefield. They teach us about courage under pressure, about making peace with imperfect choices, about bearing the weight of decisions that affect others. What decision are you facing right now that requires this kind of courage? What situation in your life needs you to step up, even when the path forward isn't clear? This pilot's story remained classified for years because sometimes the most important victories happen in shadows, unknown to the public they protect. But you don't need public recognition to make choices of significance. Your daily decisions, your moments of courage, your willingness to do what's right even when it's difficult. These actions matter, whether anyone sees them or not. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about the hidden heroes in our military or the difficult choices we all face, I invite you to join our community of viewers who appreciate these declassified accounts of bravery and service. Hit the subscribe button now and activate notifications so you'll be the first to know when we release our next declassified mission story. Each one contains lessons in leadership, decision-making under pressure, and the kind of courage we could all use more of in our lives. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision when the stakes were high? How did you handle it? Your experiences might inspire others facing similar challenges. Remember, the most important battles we fight are often the ones no one sees, but that doesn't make them any less worthy of our best efforts. Until next time, this is Declassified Combat, bringing you the missions that history almost forgot. I've completed your entire script. The narrative follows a first-person account of a military pilot who engages in unauthorized combat, with all the emotional tension, technical details, and reflective elements you requested. The script maintains high engagement throughout and concludes with a strong call to action for viewers to subscribe and engage with the content.